All right, the meeting is being recorded. So this is the adapter call on October 4th. What I wanted to start with was the adapter roadmap displayed on the screen. I've made some modifications to what was in the original planning document we reviewed in mid-September. I've removed the labels that call out a specific adapter version because they are all in the same repo as VOLTHA itself, and so that nomenclature is not very useful at this point. So right now we have an adapter that is part of VOLTHA v1.1.0 that is pending release. We'll get an update on that in just a moment. And then we are planning another adapter, enhancements to the adapter in the 1.2 release, which is supposed to be out. Switch up to the schedule view for a moment. So we are here in the with 1.1.0 still pending, a bit later than expected, and there is a desire to have a 1.2 release, which would include enhancements to the adapter or adapters by mid-November as part of 1.2. So those enhancements are fairly limited based on the limited amount of time. There's desire to have device management, some additional alarms or alarms being available at all, and support for the T&W ONU ONT was what was placed on in the plan earlier. Julie, you asked a question on Sean's behalf earlier of what ONU adapter is available in the 1.1.0. I believe that is the default ONU, which is basically the Broadcom reference ONU, and no other ONU is officially supported in that release. Kim, anyone else, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The adapter ASF Volt 16 OLT adapter works and has been tested with the Broadcom ONU adapter with a few changes over there. And then that was, like you said, it was the Broadcom reference ONU, the XREF reference ONU with that SFU with that bridge mode firmware load. So that's what was tested.
So if we look at, I'm going to go back to the planning docs for a moment to discuss, I believe what we want to do is keep the, not have separate sprints, but use the current sprints planned for the 1.1.x for development of 1.2 content. So that would look like this schedule right here. We opened sprint 1 yesterday. That'll close on the 20th. Open a second sprint, a 2-week sprint on the 23rd, closing on the 3rd, and then have one more sprint from 11/6 through 11/17. That's the current plan, and what we'll need to do is identify what the work is that needs to be done. Is anyone available to work on it in this time frame? Can we achieve 1.2 by the 11/17 date? Go to the planning doc, or to the what are the feature enhancements. This is basically more detail from the planning session that was held mid-September. So we've identified a couple of stories here, 308 and 310, that we'd like to have included in there. Then on the device management piece, there's a number of stories that already exist. 3, 11, 12, 13, 44, 45, 46, 47. And then there were some parameter alarms and performance metric stories, retrieving OLT and provision parameters. This mostly should be validation work, but we wanted to include those. And then the TBD scope is what if we develop a or we include support for the T&W ONU, is that adaptation extension of the existing ONU adapter, or is a different adapter required? And I'd say that's TBD right now until we get a little more information on the T&W ONU. Any questions, comments? So we look at the backlog in the in JIRA, and just limit it to, I've moved some things over to be in 1.2. Not all of these will likely fit, or some of these will have to be prioritized. So as we mentioned, here's 308, 310. We talked about, I talked about it a little bit earlier. There's some remaining stories that were not completed as part of 1.1.0. We'll have to identify if those are requirements for 1.2. So we need to basically do a backlog scrub on this. In the device management epic, we have these stories that were on the planning side. So, and you notice none of these there are no assignments on any of these stories, with the exception of the one that's been already substantially worked on, the research redfish story. There are some hopefully largely validation stories in the 249 epic. And then there are some placeholder stories in what I've relabeled as T&W ONU Adapter for the moment, just to distinguish from the work that was previously done with the Broadcom reference ONU Adapter. If this turns out to be an extension of the Broadcom adapter, we'll just rename this epic accordingly. A few items, these are really placeholders. There should be additional stories in here for the work that we're doing right now, or need to be done to bring in make the T&W operational. So that's there's a whole lot of stories that could be included in 1.2. The question is, who has resource to work on these, and when could that work start? And with the deafening silence, I think probably the next thing to do is have the teams look at the 1.2 content, and in the between now and next week, if possible, start moving any of these stories into Sprint 1 and take assignments on these. So I think Radisys will identify a few stories and pull those over that they plan to work on. Is anyone from Sienna on that can speak to the team? The CalSoft, I believe, was working on at least researching the redfish and device management implementation. Is that work that they would plan on taking on in the next sprint or two? Sounds like no one on from that team.
Yeah, on the list now.
Okay.
Any Rohit or any Sienna guys.
Right. Okay. Is Nokia or Adtran in position to take on any of the work associated with 1.2?
Hey, this is Nathan. I think I may be the only one on from Nokia, and I'm not in the development team, so I'm not in a position to answer.
Yeah, this is Tim Connolly. I'm not in the development team either. I think a large portion of our development team is tied up in some meetings with AT&T right now. But I don't think we're in a position to answer that at this point.
Okay. That's why don't we, I think this meeting will be relatively short. I think we've identified the work we'll need to work with the product owner to prioritize within this list what they really want to have done. And at next week's call, we'll have lost another week, but we'll, anyone who can pull stories over into the current sprint should do so. I'll put that note in the minutes and see if we get any uptake on these stories. So yeah, Julie, what if you could pass along to Sean, I'm sure he'll see it in the minutes as well, is that we've identified quite a bit of content that's targeted for 1.2. Now 1.2 may not all happen. All of this may not happen with the first release targeted for November 17th or thereabouts. Some of it may be released subsequently in another tag that could happen weeks later, but it doesn't need to wait till a 2.0.
Okay.
So I think the message is, at this point, it's doubtful that we'll get all of the desired content because we haven't started yet, and we're already behind the desired schedule that was in the planning doc. We're behind that schedule, and it looks like if we don't get a lot of uptake this week, we'll then be hard-pressed to have much of anything done in the for November 17th.
Agreed.
So it's going to require some encouragement for that to happen. All right. Any questions, concerns on 1.2? Anything to report on 1.1.0 release? Status of that release? Any change from yesterday?
Just a little bit. I think, Tim, we talking with I had some Slack with David late yesterday, and he did identify he identified the proposal for the release versions of ONOS apps to go into the release, but it still has to. I think it still has to be approved by others. Saying, he said, "Are these the right apps? Here's the versions. Are these the right ones to go?" And I think that is where it is right now. So I think a lot of attention is, diverted towards POX right now. So anyway, so that's what we have there. We're locked and loaded, ready to commit that and tag the release. We just have to have, some still have to have that approval that that's right, and there just isn't time. David said he did what he could to get that, but he couldn't look any further.
Right, and it requires others' review and acknowledgement that those are the right releases within the ONOS apps, and so that's, so we're waiting on others for that. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
And on the adapter side, the adapter is in there, and the driver side, the driver side build and documentation stuff, that is in there and ready to go. I need to check point with Nathan, who's on the call, on couple of those things, just to make sure that the build works and builds something, something runnable in there. And Nathan's having a little bit of problem, but I'll check with him on that after the call.
Okay. I'll give a brief update on a discussion I had just before this call with Dave Barron of Broadcom, working through the distribution of the EdgeCore patch file. Dave is trying to connect with his legal team to come up with the answer to the question, how could that patch file be distributed? The two concepts at the moment that the Broadcom is looking at is to have EdgeCore upload that patch file to a common CSP that has already been established, and then those with access to that CSP could download it. An alternate and perhaps better option would be that Broadcom, that EdgeCore uploads to a CSP that patch file. Broadcom takes that and then posts that to their DocSafe, where those with access to DocSafe can then retrieve that file. That provides better control and traceability from Broadcom's point of view, and should not hinder access to that patch file for those with DocSafe access, which should be everyone that has has access to the SDK.
Yeah, the BAL SDK.
BAL SDK. Thank you.
Right. BAL Maple. Yeah.
Right. So,
hey, Tim, this is Rick from EdgeCore. Do we have a timeline when that might happen, or does he know how long it's going to take to get through legal? Because I like that later idea about putting it on DocSafe.
That was the preferred. That's the preferred method.
That's my preferred way. Yeah.
Dave said he would get back to me this afternoon with the results of his discussion with his legal team. So
okay, cool.
He understands that this is very topical, that this issue has been out there for a long time, and we're at the point where we have to have a decision from Broadcom on this. So
right.
We'll keep the pressure on Broadcom to come up with the answer and a timely implementation of that.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yep. Any other topics for this call? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. We'll close the call. A reminder that there is a call coming up at 9 a.m. to review the VOL 419 and what was it, VOL 470 issues that come up.
460.
460. Thank you, to come up with a solution to that issue that has been in discussion for the last several weeks. So for those interested in attending, that will same bridge, but we'll stop this call now and restart at 9 a.m. All right, thanks all.